Do you believe in places where even eagles dare not perch? China doesn't just have mountains, it has secrets carved into vertical stone. Temples cling to razor-thin pinnacles by a single wooden beam. Rickety planks suspended over 2,000-meter drops. Ancient coffins wait in caves no ladder can reach, while golden halls vanish into a sea of clouds. Here, the boundary between courage and the abyss is a single, trembling step. Dare to look down? Taiyun Mountain. A razor-thin limestone needle stabs into the heavens, supporting a structure that renders modern engineering obsolete. This miniature shrine clings to 65 square feet of rock, suspended over the sheer voids of the Qinling Range. Every single brick and stone was carried up a vertical climb centuries ago during the Ming Dynasty. Builders did not use mortar, cement, or any modern adhesive to secure the walls. Instead, they relied on a sophisticated system of interlocking stones and pure gravity. For over 400 years, the peak has been battered by violent earthquakes and mountain storms that have leveled entire villages in the valleys below. Yet, this fragile-looking box remains unmoved. The secret lies in the foundation, where the weight of the structure is calculated to press directly into the center of the rock peak. One inch of miscalculation would have sent the entire temple spiraling into the abyss. Visitors must scale a narrow ridge where a single gust of wind can throw a human body off balance. There are no safety nets here, just a sheer drop of over 5,000 feet, and the sound of wind whistling through cracks in the rock. Mingyu Mountain. Ancient legends claim this peak was the final stepping stone for the moon goddess Chang before she left the mortal world. Today, that celestial connection takes the form of a steel and concrete walkway bolted directly into the granite face. Stretching for nearly 10,000 feet, the path hangs at an altitude of 5,000 feet above sea level. On days when the humidity peaks, the valley below vanishes under a thick white carpet, leaving the walkway suspended in a void. There is no visible ground, only a railing separating the human body from a mile-deep drop into the mist. The air here is so thin and damp that every breath feels like drinking the clouds. Walking this route is less about hiking and more about floating through a landscape that refuses to stay solid. Yunchu Mountain. While the surrounding valleys swelter in 86-degree Fahrenheit summer heat, a prehistoric anomaly exists just beneath the surface of the slopes. This mountain contains a labyrinth of ice caves formed over 3 million years ago that never melt. Stepping inside causes the temperature to plummet to 14 degrees Fahrenheit in seconds. Giant crystal pillars and jagged ice curtains coat the rock walls, surviving in a state of permanent deep freeze. This is not caused by the altitude or a freak weather pattern. It is the result of a rare cold trap ventilation system, where the mountain's internal structure inhales freezing winter air and locks it in the lowest chambers. Surrounding this frozen underworld are ancient Taoist temples where priests have lived for generations, guarding the entrance to what they believe is an eternal winter god's lair. The transition from blistering sun to jagged ice is so violent that the rock itself often cracks under the thermal shock. Wuyi Mountain. Growing from the vertical cracks of mineral-rich cliffs are 6 ancient bushes that produce the most expensive tea on the planet. A single pound of this Da Hong Pao leaf has sold for over $1 million. Workers must descend on ropes just to harvest the foliage from these treacherous heights. But as your eyes move from the tea bushes to the dark recesses of the stone walls, the scenery turns grim. Tucked into horizontal crevices hundreds of feet above the river are wooden coffins dating back 3,000 years. These heavy timber boxes belong to the Bo people, an ethnic group that vanished centuries ago. No one has explained how ancient tribes lifted several hundred-pound caskets up sheer 90-degree walls without pulleys or cranes. The wood sits exposed to the elements, rotting slowly in the humid air while suspended over the dark water. The earth here looks as though it has been soaked in blood. This crimson landscape is the result of millions of years of iron oxidation trapped within layers of sandstone. Over time, erosion has stripped away the softer earth, leaving behind massive, thin vertical slabs that change hue depending on the moisture in the air. Among these jagged formations are two specific monoliths that have made this region world famous. One is a massive stone pillar, standing nearly 92 feet or 28 meters tall, shaped with anatomical precision to resemble a male organ. Directly across the valley, a deep, narrow cave opening mimics the female form. Local villagers have treated these geological anomalies as sacred fertility shrines. For over 1,000 years, performing rituals to ensure the survival of their bloodlines. The sheer scale of these formations makes it impossible to view them as mere coincidences of nature. High-strength winds have carved the sandstone into smooth, lifelike curves that dominate the skyline. It is a place where biology and geology merge into a singular, jarring visual experience. Every summer, the heat makes the red rock radiate a dull glow, intensifying the biological shapes carved into the crust of the earth. But if red stone is a masterpiece of the ground, the next temple is a challenge from the sky. Ganlu Temple. Inside a cavernous red sandstone mouth, an entire 4-story architectural complex hangs in mid-air without touching the ground. This temple was built in the year 1146, yet it does not use a single iron nail or modern foundation. The entire weight of the massive wooden halls, estimated at several dozen tons, rests on the head of a single vertical wooden trunk known as the pillar that supports the sky. This central mast is wedged into a natural rock socket at the base and fans out into an intricate web of interlocking brackets at the top. It functions like a giant umbrella, distributing the immense pressure of the tile roofs and heavy timber frames across the uneven floor of the cave. Even during heavy rainstorms, the overhanging cliff acts as a natural shield, keeping the wood dry and preventing rot. To enter, one must walk along a narrow balcony where the floorboards creak under the weight of the mountain's shadow. The structural logic seems to defy gravity, holding tons of history on a solitary piece of cedar. Longhu Mountain. A heavy wooden box swings over the Luxi River, suspended by nothing but vine ropes and ancient pulleys. This reenactment of the hanging coffin ceremony attempts to explain how hundreds of caskets were stashed into caves located 600 feet, 180 meters, up a sheer, vertical wall. Most observers assume simple ropework solved the problem, but the internal logic of the coffins suggests a more complex mechanical secret. The timber boxes were constructed using intricate mortise and tenon joints, allowing them to be assembled or expanded once inside the narrow rock fissures. This modular design meant ancient workers didn't have to haul a finished, massive casket up the cliff. Instead, they moved individual, interlocking pieces that functioned like a structural puzzle. These joints were so precise that they remained locked for over 2,000 years without a single metal nail. Even with modern climbing gear, reaching these holes in the rock face is a grueling task, yet the ancient Yue people populated these heights with entire cemeteries of heavy cedar. Drak Yerpa. The air at 16,000 feet, 5,000 meters, carries barely enough oxygen to sustain a steady heartbeat. Here, the white limestone cliffs are pockmarked with over 100 meditation caves where hermits have lived in total isolation for centuries. At this altitude, the atmospheric pressure is so low that a candle flame struggles to stay lit, and water boils at temperatures far below the standard. This raises a physiological mystery that defies medical norms. Human lungs typically fail in such thin air, yet the residents of these rock pockets spent decades practicing deep breathing exercises in sub-zero temperatures. There are no trees for fuel and no flat ground for crops. Survival depends entirely on small offerings carried up treacherous mountain trails by pilgrims who often collapse from exhaustion before reaching the shrines. The sheer verticality of the site means every daily task, from fetching water to moving between cells, involves a direct confrontation with a 4,000-foot, 1,200-meter drop. Mount Tai power in ancient China was validated by the ability to conquer this massive granite spine. "72 emperors, including the first emperor Qin Shi Huang, ascended these slopes to perform sacred rituals that signaled their mandate to rule. The journey involves climbing 7,000 hand-carved stone steps that snake upward through narrow mountain passes. The most brutal section, known as the 18 Bends, consists of 1,300 steps squeezed into a stretch of less than half a mile, 800 meters. The incline here reaches 70 degrees, forcing climbers to witness nothing but the heels of the person directly above them. Amidst the crowds of tourists, professional porters move with rhythmic precision, balancing 200 pounds, 90 kilograms of supplies on bamboo poles. These men navigate the vertical staircase multiple times a day, their calf muscles hardened like the rock itself. The path is lined with thousands of stone inscriptions carved into the cliff faces, some dating back 2 millennia, marking the spots where rulers paused to gasp for air. Below the summit, the stairs narrow until there is barely enough room for two people to pass, flanked by iron chains that have been polished smooth by millions of hands. The final ascent leads to a plateau where the surrounding peaks appear like small islands, poking through a permanent layer of low-lying clouds. Mount Ma. The ascent begins in a humid, subtropical jungle where the air is heavy with the scent of damp ferns and ancient moss. As the trail gains elevation, the landscape undergoes a violent transformation, replacing lush greenery with skeletal pines encrusted in thick layers of rime ice. At the summit, nearly 10,000 feet, 3,000 meters above sea level, the terrain terminates in a series of fractured rock walls that drop vertically for thousands of feet into a white void. This is the Golden Summit, where a 48-meter-tall, 157-foot statue of Samantabhadra, plated in pure gold, towers over the clouds. While the atmosphere around the temples is thick with incense and silence, the narrow stone stairs below are patrolled by troops of wild Tibetan macaques. These primates are notoriously aggressive, known to physically ambush travelers to snatch bags or food. A single lapse in concentration near the cliff edge can lead to a violent confrontation with the animals, or a slip into the abyss hidden beneath the mist. The gold of the monument glimmers through a permanent sea of clouds that completely obscures the jagged ravines and the true depth of the mountain's fractured base. Bajau Jai. Looking down from the main ridge reveals a sandstone formation extending horizontally into the sky like the neck of a giant dragon. The top of this stone blade is barely 8 inches, 20 centimeters wide, and lacks any form of guardrails or safety supports. On either side of this narrow path is a sheer drop of over 1,000 feet, 300 meters, into a dense, jagged forest. Powerful gusts of wind constantly scream through the valley, making it impossible for a human to stand upright on the exposed ridge. Despite the lethal conditions, a ritual known as burning the dragon head incense persists. Worshippers must crawl on their stomachs along the razor-thin rock, gripping the rough sandstone with their fingernails to reach the very tip of the pinnacle. After lighting the incense and offering a prayer, they must attempt a backward crawl to safety while suspended over the open air. The rock surface has been polished smooth by centuries of hands and knees scraping against it, increasing the risk of a fatal slide. A sudden shift in wind direction or a single tremor in the hands has sent many into the void. Enchi Grand Canyon. A solitary spire of cast limestone stands 490 feet, 150 meters, tall in the center of a deep, humid gorge. At its narrowest point, the diameter of this rock pillar is less than 13 feet, 4 meters, creating a top-heavy structure that defies the laws of balance. Geologists remain puzzled by how this formation has withstood millions of years of intense wind erosion and frequent seismic activity. The rock is composed of high-density limestone that managed to resist the surrounding decay that leveled the rest of the canyon floor. During heavy mountain storms, the pillar vibrates as high-velocity winds whip through the valley, yet it remains perfectly vertical without any secondary rock formations to support it. No cables or braces hold the structure in place. It stands as a geological freak of nature, a giant stone needle held upright only by its own internal density and the air surrounding its smooth, vertical faces. Mount Hua. The entire mountain is a massive, singular block of granite, rising abruptly from the plains of Shaanxi with vertical faces that look as if they were sliced by a giant blade. 5 distinct peaks form a lotus shape, connected by ridgelines narrower than a standard sidewalk. At the South Peak, over 7,000 feet, 2,100 meters up, the trail simply ends at a vertical drop. This is the entrance to the plank walk in the sky. A series of iron chains, rusted by decades of mountain rain, are bolted directly into the stone wall. Below these chains, foot-wide wooden planks are held together by wire and iron brackets. There are no guardrails. The wood underfoot often groans and vibrates as mountain winds scream through the rock gaps. To pass another person on this 100-foot-long ledge, hikers must physically unclip their safety harnesses from the cable for a few seconds, standing on the very edge of the void with zero protection. The rock face is so smooth, it offers no handholds. One slip means a fall of 6,000 feet into the jagged valley below. This section of the climb is so psychologically taxing that many participants find their muscles locking up mid-path, paralyzed by the sight of their own shoes hanging over 2,000 meters of empty air. Wulanhada Volcano Geopark. Emerging from the flat Inner Mongolian grasslands is a series of pitch-black scars that look like they belong on a dead planet. These are volcanic cones, with craters so perfectly circular they appear to have been drafted by a compass. The ground is not covered in soil, but in millions of loose grey pumice stones and sharp volcanic scoria that crunch under every step. There is no vegetation, no shelter, and no sound. Walking along the rim of volcano number 5 feels like navigating the surface of the moon, with the surrounding green plains appearing like a distant alien world. The wind here carries a metallic scent of minerals and cold ash. Visitors often wear astronaut suits to lean into the surreal isolation of this barren landscape, where the silence of the hollow craters creates an overwhelming sense of cosmic solitude. Jagana. Inside the Diebu Mountains is a natural fortress where the walls are made of sheer limestone cliffs, reaching heights of over 12,000 feet, 3,600 meters. This stone city is surrounded by a massive circular mountain range that creates a nearly impenetrable barrier against the outside world. Local Tibetan legends refer to this place as the land of the creation god, a territory carved out of the crust to remain a secret from mortals. The only access is through a narrow gorge that opens into a valley where traditional wooden houses are built into the slopes. These homes are overshadowed by stone pillars that resemble giant grey guardians. The scale of the surrounding rock faces is so immense that the entire village is plunged into darkness for several hours a day as the sun struggles to crest the vertical ridges. Mount Fanjing. This vertical column of metamorphic rock towers over the surrounding subtropical forests like a giant stone thumb. Known as the Red Cloud's Golden Summit, the peak reaches an altitude of over 7,600 feet, or 2,300 meters. A narrow vertical fissure called the Golden Sword Gorge splits the summit into two distinct pinnacles. On top of each pinnacle sits a Buddhist temple, connected by a narrow stone bridge that arches over a bottomless abyss. To reach these structures, visitors must scale thousands of stone steps carved into 90-degree cliffs, gripping iron chains, while mountain winds threaten to pull them into the mist. Builders centuries ago hauled heavy timber and tile up these vertical faces, piece by piece, to construct shrines on a surface that appears to float above the clouds. The entire formation is a geological anomaly, a solitary pillar of ancient rock that survived millions of years of erosion while the surrounding landscape fell away. The bridge itself was built using granite slabs carried across the thin ridge, suspended over a drop of several hundred meters, where the air is often thick with freezing fog. Looking down from the center of the span reveals nothing but a white void, creating a sense of total isolation from the earth below. Meili Snow Mountain. Kawagebo is a jagged fortress of blue ice and black rock that locals consider the residence of a protective deity. Reaching 22,113 feet or 6,740 meters, it has successfully repelled every attempt at a summit. In January 1991, a joint Chinese and Japanese expedition established a high camp on the slopes, only to be wiped out in a single night. "17 climbers vanished without a trace, marking the deadliest incident in the history of Chinese mountaineering. No bodies were found for 7 years, until the glacier began to spit out fragments of clothing and gear miles below the original campsite. Locals believe the mountain goddess triggered a massive avalanche to cleanse the slopes of human presence. Following this disaster, the government issued a permanent ban on climbing. The peak is now a sacred monument where the only human interaction allowed is from the safety of a distant ridge. At dawn, the first rays of the sun hit the summit at a specific angle, turning the white ice into a blinding, solid, gold pyramid. This phenomenon, known as the Golden Mountain under the sun, lasts only minutes before the peak retreats back into the cold, untouchable shadows of the Himalayas. Luofu has been a Taoist retreat for almost 2,000 years. Wandering through its valleys, you find remnants of old alchemy labs, places where sages once searched for elixirs using rare minerals gathered from the surrounding peaks. The mountain's humid climate and layered ridges create pockets of medicinal herbs found nowhere else in Guangdong, which fueled centuries of experiments. Even today, some practitioners still come here to live in isolation, following recipes recorded in bamboo scrolls. Luofu does not flaunt its mysteries. It keeps them tucked between steaming forests and quiet stone paths. Jiangxi granite pillars dominate Sanqingshan, rising like coiled serpents above the clouds. The tallest reach more than 1,800 meters and bear names inspired by the shapes they resemble. For Taoists, this mountain served as a natural laboratory. The strange rock columns trap mist in narrow channels, creating perfect conditions for gathering dew used in early alchemy rituals. Travelers who weave through its suspended walkways feel the terrain change every few steps, from sharp ridges to hidden basins that fill with fog. Sankingshan feels sculpted rather than eroded, a place where the stone itself appears to shift roles in the story. Jiangxi Mingyu, the bright moon, is known for its natural hot springs scattered across a high ridge system. The water carries unusual mineral compositions, feeding moss forests that glow an emerald green, even in winter. The mountain's circular basin traps moonlight on clear nights, creating reflections so sharp that locals claim you can read by them. Travelers come for the springs, but many stay for the quiet way Mingyu changes after dusk, when steam lifts from the pools and the entire ridge feels suspended between night and morning. Dot the slopes of Zhongnan, a range long associated with reclusion and spiritual pursuit. For centuries, scholars, poets, and monks vanished into these valleys, returning decades later with writings that shaped Chinese philosophy. Even today, modern practitioners still live in remote huts along the ridgelines, relying on mountain springs and meditation for survival. The range stretches over 100 kilometers, its deep ravines creating natural barriers that keep the outside world distant. Zhongnan is not a place people visit casually. It is a place they disappear into, seeking something they rarely speak about when they return. The first sight of Mount Gongga is disarming. The peak rises more than 7,500 meters, a perfect white pyramid towering above forests, glaciers, and drifting seas of cloud. Locals call it the King of Sichuan's mountains, and the title is not poetic exaggeration. Gongga dominates its surroundings, the way a storm dominates the sky. But beauty here is a trap. Climbers who approach the massif quickly realize why its fatality rate has surpassed that of Everest. The mountain is ringed with steep ice walls that collapse without warning. Storms roll in within minutes, turning clear skies into blizzards thick enough to erase entire ridgelines. Avalanches hit with no pattern, no rhythm. Even seasoned teams have been forced back by winds strong enough to tear tents off the glacier. What makes the mountain even more surreal is the world at its base. Subtropical forests press against the lower slopes, where orchids and mosses thrive in warm valleys fed by glacial melt. A few hundred meters higher, crystalline lakes mirror the cathedral-like walls of ice. Red boulders, rich in iron, scatter the ridges like ancient markers. Hot springs bubble from fault lines, their mineral water used for healing by local Tibetan communities. And above it all, rare animals move through the landscape as if it belongs solely to them. Snow leopards slipping across rock, blue sheep grazing on impossible ledges, golden monkeys haunting the tree line. Everything about Gongga is contradiction. Life flourishes in its shadow, yet death waits at its heights. The mountain rises from jungle to glacier in a single sweep, a vertical world compressed into one colossal wall of stone and ice. Standing at its base, you understand why climbers use only one word to describe Gongga: respect. Qinghai pilgrims say you do not climb Amni Machine, you circle it. The mountain is the protector deity of the Amdo Tibetans, rising more than 6,200 meters and wrapped in glaciers that shine with a bluish glow. Each year, thousands begin the Kora Trek, a journey that can take several weeks as they walk more than 100 kilometers around the massif. The weather turns instantly, snowstorms hitting without warning, yet the devotion never wavers. Prayer flags line the ridges, snapping in the wind like messages carried straight into the sky. Amna Machin is less a summit and more a living shrine. Sichuan further south, 4 peaks rise in perfect formation, earning the name the Four Sisters. The tallest stands above 6,000 meters, drawing technical climbers from around the world. The locals say each peak has its own temperament: gentle, distant, proud, and cold. Alpine meadows stretch at their feet, while vertical granite walls guard the upper slopes. Golden snub-nosed monkeys roam the valleys, and glaciers cling to the ridgelines. Siguniang offers everything a mountaineer desires and everything that humbles them: beauty and difficulty braided into a single skyline. Sichuan Jianuoduoji rises sharply above the Yarding valleys, its ridgelines carved into clean geometric planes that look almost designed. Standing a little over 5,800 meters, it forms one of the 3 sacred peaks worshipped for centuries by Tibetan communities. Pilgrims describe Jianuoduoji as the protector, the mountain whose reflection in Milk Lake and Five Color Lake is believed to cleanse one's intentions before a Kora. The air here is unusually clear, so still that voices seem to travel farther than they should. Surrounding forests shelter blue sheep, marmots, and rare birds that thrive in the high-altitude silence. China's dangerous peaks are more than just stone and clouds. They are the ultimate test of the human spirit. In these forbidden zones, nature still holds the final say. Whether you seek spiritual peace or a heart-pounding climb, some secrets are best left untouched. Thank you for joining us. Subscribe now to explore more of our planet's greatest mysteries and hidden wonders.